move on to our next story here. This one is about Wolf Blitzer and Joy Reid combined. So what's interesting about this story is I told you that I feel like you're noticing a shift in the narrative. When this attack happened on October 7th, notice that they were referring to the Palestinian people as Hamas as if it's all one thing, which was not true. You notice how they were mainly talking about the state of Israel and protecting them and their right to defend themselves. And they were completely leaving out what's happening to the Palestinian people and the history of what the Palestinian people have gone through over the past 75 years, them living in an open air prison, the resource being controlled by the state of Israel, and the fact that the UN has declared this to be a humanitarian crisis, moreover, multiple times before October 7th. And then you have the numbers of people out in the street protesting across the world. Well, it sort of pushed the hand of mainstream media to where, because it was so many people and because it got so much attention, particularly on social media and independent media, mainstream media had no choice but to finally address the other side of the issue, which I do not believe they wanted to discuss. So first, we're going to show Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer actually interviewed an IDF spokesman about an Israeli airstrike. This was the one that hit the refugee camp that we mentioned the other day. And you just have to see this for yourself, because Wolf Blitzer is actually going to push back on the spokesman, because I mean, at this point, like, you can't keep defending this. You know, these are not the days of the Iraq war where a lot of Americans are duped and just believe we're doing the right thing. These are not the days of going into Afghanistan where, again, a lot of Americans are duped and believe we're doing the right thing. Things are very different now. There's a lot of social media. There's more independent journalists in these spots showing us what's really happening. And so Wolf Blitzer pushes back on the IDF spokesperson here in this interview. Listen to this.
Yes, now is Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht. He's the international spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to ask you first about this massive blast that we all just saw. We saw the video at the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Is there anything more you could first of all tell us about how this explosion happened?
Hi, Wolf. Thanks for having me. So we'll be coming out in the next, hopefully, hour with more data, but I can update you now that there was a very senior Hamas commander in that area. Sadly, he was hiding, again, as they do, behind within civilians. And that's all I can say at this point. We're looking into it, and we'll be coming out with more data as we learn what happened there.
Let me pause there for a second. How do we know that that's true? Because I'm going to show you something else that happened today, which mainstream media had to actually come out and say what the IDF said was false. We're going to get to that clip as well. How do we know that's true? We're supposed to take his word for it? As if he's going to say, oh, yeah, you know, we just wanted to go after them, like, whatever. We're just supposed to take his word for it. Just keep that in mind. Now listen to this.
So can you confirm it was an Israeli attack that destroyed a big chunk of that Jabalia refugee camp?
Yes, I can. We were focused again on our target, a senior commander, Wolf, and we'll be updating you with more data as the hour moves ahead.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
So you see what's happening here? You see what's happening? The look on Wolf Blitzer, by the way, usually is not one to have much facial expression, but look at the expression on his face. Like, what the fuck? What? Now look at where Wolf is. See, this is also part of the problem. Anderson Cooper was doing this as well. Wolf Blitzer right now is in Tel Aviv. He's not in Gaza. Anderson Cooper is not going into Gaza. He was also in Tel Aviv. So you see the propaganda, and we're going to get into more about this when we talk about Noam Chomsky's propaganda points in reference to media. You see the propaganda that's happening, people. Who are the media people that are actually going into Gaza? Al Jazeera and other independent news outlets. Those are the people actually going into Gaza. CNN and MSNBC, these people are just hanging out in Tel Aviv. You see this? All right, let's go on.
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was. Killed many, many Israelis. We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there. There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
How does blowing up a structure or a camp which is above ground destroy the tunnels that are underground? You know, it's just, I'm not in the military. Never been to war. But I do understand infrastructure. Okay. It's just, somebody explain this to me. Somebody explain this to me.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there. You knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp, attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
So you see what he's doing? Do you see what? Look at the look on Wolf's face. He's just like, wait a minute now. Let me get this straight. You knew that there were all those innocent civilians there, and you chose to do this anyway?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated. Yes, we know that he was killed. About the civilians there, we're doing everything we can to minimize. I'll say it again. Sadly.
So it was worth it for them to kill all those people for one person. And again, how do we know that this guy was killed? How do we know? Again, we're supposed to take his word for it.
They are hiding themselves within civilian population. And again, we are doing this stage by stage, and we're going to go after every one of these terrorists who was involved in that heinous attack on the 7th of October. Wolf.
So let me just say this here for just a second. First, they told you they were in the tunnels. So if they're in the tunnels, why aren't you in the tunnel? Right, Percy. How do we know he was there? We don't. We have no confirmation of that. You see the problem, people? Some of you, I don't know, but I'm old enough to remember when mainstream media and our government lied to us and told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So I'm skeptical to trust anything when it comes to war in mainstream media. Now, that was Wolf Blitzer. Now we get to Joy Reid. Stop Cop City shared this on Twitter. When MSNBC is airing this, you know Israel has lost the propaganda war. Listen to this.
And given these bombings are being done using our tax dollars, perhaps we should ask some questions. For example, how does bombing a densely populated land strip filled 50% with children constitute self-defense?
I never thought I would say this, ladies and gentlemen, but that's a good question. I never thought I would say this in reference to Joy Reid, because usually she just totes the State Department narrative. But you see what's happening?
How does bombing hospitals, churches, mosques, and UN schools constitute self-defense? Well, you say if Hamas fighters are hiding in the hospital using the civilians as human shields, okay, let's say they are. Are you arguing that flattening the hospital and killing newborns in their incubators and their moms in the NICU, cancer patients, someone with a broken leg, the doctors, nurses, and just the women and kids hiding in the hospital, that's not a war crime? Because you would be wrong, according to international law. And given
You know, this is one of those things that I think can also have an effect on mothers, the mothers seeing the children. That can have a big effect. I still remember when, you know, the kids are still in cages, but when it was under Trump's presidency, I remember like moms being like, oh my gosh, those poor kids. Funny, some of those moms now just pretend like kids are no longer in cages at the border, but whatever. But do you see what's happening? Again, I really do believe that this is because of the mass movements on the outside. And this is really where it needs to come from. Now, I want to show you another clip. This one is also from CNN when they actually had to correct something. Now, apparently earlier today, pull this up here. Israel admitted targeting ambulances, but claimed Hamas were inside. The Red Cross has rejected this claim. So listen to this. So CNN had to come back and say this. See, I'm telling you, it's all coming out now.
That the convoy was leaving the hospital towards the Rafah crossing. And perhaps most damningly, we've just been hearing, Jessica, from the Red Cross, who confirmed that they had been given information about this particular convoy that was due to leave the Shifa hospital on its way to the Rafah crossing. What we know about the attack is that there are several casualties, many wounded as well, and that this does appear now to have been a convoy of wounded Palestinians being taken to the Rafah crossing that was hit as part of that IDF strike, now claimed.
Let's go back because she talks kind of fast. Let's go back. I want you to understand what she's really saying here. Just go back just a little bit. So it says Israel admits airstrike on ambulance outside the hospital. Now, Israel claimed that Hamas was hiding in that ambulance. The Red Cross is saying that is not true. Listen.
Jessica, from the Red Cross, who confirmed that they had been given information about this particular convoy that was due to leave the Shifa hospital on its way to the Rafah crossing. What we know about the attack is that there are several casualties, many wounded as well, and that this does appear now to have been a convoy of wounded Palestinians being taken to the Rafah crossing that was hit as part of that IDF strike, now claimed.
It was a convoy of wounded Palestinians in that ambulance. Wounded Palestinians in that ambulance, not Hamas.
That was hit as part of that IDF strike, now claimed by the IDF again, with the idea that this was part of their operation to take on Hamas. The evidence that we're getting from those sources, not just inside the Al-Shifa hospital, but again, from the Red Cross, does seem to contradict that.
So what is Joe Biden going to do about that? Because that's a war crime. See, again, they have to report it now because this information is coming out from so many other places. Now, for those who push back and say you should not participate in this struggle, you should not fight for what's happening, for the Palestinian people. For me, this is not about religion. It's not. And for this gentleman, it's not about religion either. It's about being a human being. I don't have to be Palestinian. I don't have to be Muslim. I don't have to live there to see that what is happening is wrong. And those of us at RBN, we've been talking about this ever since we started streaming, to be honest with you. We've been talking about the Israel-Palestine issue. And over the past couple of years, we were repeatedly told that this is not an important issue. And now we see differently. I want you to listen to what this gentleman said here, because he's going to explain to you why it does not matter if you're Palestinian or if you're Muslim or not. Listen to this.
Palestinian asking people why they support Palestine.
Because I'm a human being. Do you think I'm going to sit back, watch my TV and watch a genocide? No chance. This isn't about religion. So it's not about being Muslim, being Jewish, whatever. I'm a Christian, right? But I'm a human being. That's all that matters to me. I know people keep saying open air prison, but I watched something today that was about the language that you use, right?
Yeah.
actually they're hostages. So everyone's talking about hostages.
Yeah.
Come on.
2 million people, hostages.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And this will never, ever, ever end until they're free.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Palestinian asking people.
You guys see that? That's what this is about. It's not about that. You know, you don't have to be, again, I want to explain the difference between solidarity and unity. Unity is coming together. Solidarity is when you put someone else's needs before your own. So I ain't got to be the same as you. It just is what it is. I don't have to be the same as you to fight for you. That's what that's about. We have to go back to the civil rights movement. We have to remember it wasn't just black people out there fighting for civil rights. There were also white comrades that joined along with them to fight for those rights. Putting someone else's needs ahead of your own. Now, Rome said something. Rome is my comrade from RB, and I want you to hear what Rome said. He said, I don't have to like you to stand up for you. Listen to this.
You know, it's a shame how some of you people work. When we are standing up for a group of oppressed people, why is it you come to us and say, oh, you're black. They don't like black people. Why you speaking up for them? You are an atheist. They don't like atheists. Why are you speaking up for them? You are this. They are that. Why are you speaking up for them? They don't like you. Why are you speaking up for them? Solidarity isn't a popularity contest. I don't give a damn if the shit is happening to Jim, Sally, Tyrone, Muhammad. If it's wrong, I'm going to speak up. And if it can happen to them, it can happen to me easily. What makes us so different besides our skin color or religion or lack of? We all are humans. We all are on this earth together, and we all live under the fucking iron fist of the empire. And just because the nigga don't like me, don't mean I'm not gonna stand up for what's right. Solidarity isn't a popularity contest. Ain't nobody gotta like your ass. Ain't nobody gotta move and step with you every fucking walk of the way. But when we speak up, when it's time to speak up, that's when it's time to speak up. Because right is right and wrong is wrong. Straight the fuck up. Fuck who likes you. We know who hates you. We know who hates you. And they hate us all. And if we don't stand up against these motherfuckers, who will?
So that's something I want you to take home with you. That's Rome, one of my comrades from RBN. I want you to take that home with you, what he said there about solidarity is not a popularity contest. And sometimes I think some of the people who actually preach that rhetoric to us, they're just trying to stop us from trying to fight for other people. You know, it's like, let me find a way to break up this movement. Let me come in here and say, you know, you really don't need to be fighting for those people because I knew someone who was Palestinian and they said this about black people. Really? That whole one person that you know represents the entire Palestinian community? It's things like that. So we have to be very careful about the message that is put into our ears from naysayers who don't want to be involved with that fight. And I totally get it. There's always going to be critiques here and there. But some people will go to extremes to make sure that you do not stand in solidarity with other people. And those are the people that you need to be very cautious of and you need to give a side eye to, because you need to ask yourself, what's their agenda? What are you fighting for? Start asking people this. When people come to you and they criticize you for attending protests or trying to have solidarity with people, just turn to them and say, what are you doing? What are you fighting for? Who are you helping in your community? What you been working on lately? Most of the time, nothing. Think about that. Now, the media narrative is starting to shift because it has to, because of the mass movements on the ground. But this also is related to the media and mass manipulation. So we're going to learn a little bit here tonight. We're going to dive in a little bit into Noam Chomsky's propaganda in reference to the media. There are 5 stages of this that we are going to focus on, because I want you to understand how mainstream media is able to control the narrative and basically brainwash a lot of people. Let's dive into this clip here. Noam Chomsky's media and mass manipulation. Listen to this.
Scientifically informed, guided mass manipulation by experts and specialists working for the government and for corporations. Chomsky's theory is basically a response to Lippmann and Bernays. And Chomsky's main points are the following. First, elite-guided mass media manipulation has been central to the functioning of capitalism in liberal democracies. But second, that's illiberal and non-democratic. Third, what is needed instead? A truly democratic, anarchic mass media within libertarian socialism. Domination-free mass media in an open public sphere. Fourth, Chomsky pointed to small, diverse, local community media, like radio stations or magazines, as examples of providing quality information and serving as a forum for public debate.
Let's pause here for just a second and look at number 1. Elite-guided mass media manipulation has been central to the functioning of capitalism in liberal democracies. Pay attention to elite-guided mass media. So who controls the media? Who controls the information that we are actually receiving? And this point here that Chomsky has about small, diverse, local community media, this is what we've been trying to drive people towards, these smaller outlets, right? Like even myself, I'm still considered a small outlet, or some of the media's channels that you see on YouTube, for example, and independent media.
And then fifth, however, these media are suppressed, and instead mass media function as outlined by him in the propaganda model.
Pause. However, these media are suppressed. Instead, mass media function as outlined in the propaganda model. What do we talk about all the time on YouTube? We talk about how independent media is being suppressed by YouTube, that they changed their algorithm a couple of years ago to implement that suppression and make sure that people who actually have these verified network channels, so to speak, and mainstream media channels like CNN and MSNBC on YouTube are pushed to the top of that algorithm, and independent media is pushed further down to the bottom. So just pay attention to this. Now let's move on.
The propaganda model, which, as mentioned, is actually a manipulation model, focuses on 5 filters used to select information and brainwash people. The first filter is size, ownership, and profit orientation.
Pause. Size, ownership, and profit orientation. Okay, so if you look at a lot of mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, when we look at the size, these are large networks, right? Who owns these networks? You have companies like Disney that owns a lot of network television. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Disney even owns ESPN. So you have to pay attention to this. This is how one of the ways they control the narrative.
Media information is produced by large privately owned corporations, which constitute a sort of monopoly. They are in alliance with the political elites and marginalize small, individually or collectively owned anarchist nonprofit media and keep them from power. Second filter is advertising. The main sources of revenue of corporate mass media are not the receivers of information, but advertising. The media.
Advertising. So this is another thing, right? Certain companies, certain sponsors are not going to advertise on your network if you're talking about a narrative that does not actually support, what they're trying to do as a business model. If I tell you to leave the two-party system, obviously not many advertisers are going to want to flock my way. If we're talking about police brutality, often not many advertisers are going to want to flock my way. This is all very important. So advertising. That's an important piece.
Media
That's two.
companies primarily serve the interests of the advertisers, not the consumers. The third filter is sources. News reporting relies on corporate news agencies and official government information. This information is often generated by spin doctors. Journalists receive information secondhand or ready-made. There are few neutral sources of information. Investigative journalism is limited. The fourth filter is flak. Flak is a military metaphor, literally meaning anti-aircraft fire. Flak are actions by governments or corporations to prevent or dismiss bad press, for instance, through legal, political, or economic means, or through media campaigns.
That goes back to the Twitter files, of course, Julian Assange, of course, Edward Snowden. Like, see, this is all connected. This goes back to the censorship, etc.
Prominent recipients of flak today are Julian Assange or Edward Snowden. The fifth filter is anti-communism, or fear. The first edition of the book was published shortly before the end of the Cold War in 1988. And anti-communism was still the leading ideology of reporting then. In more recent editions of the book, the anti-communism filter has been updated to fear, the spreading of negative images of dangerous enemies of the USA, like Saddam Hussein, Islam, or more recently, China and Russia.
You guys see this? So one way that they manipulate you is they have to make you afraid of something or someone. Maybe it's Russia who's the boogeyman. Maybe it's China. Maybe it's right now they're trying to, twist this a little bit and say we have to be concerned about, the Palestinian people and yada, yada. Like, they have to have that fear element so that you stay glued to that network so you'll see what is going to happen next. Why do you think during storms, there are some people who will sit down and they will actually just sit there and watch local news coverage of hurricane coming through or coming close to their town for hours? They'll just sit there and watch it because there is that fear. Oh God, what is this hurricane going to do? It's a category 5. Oh my gosh, what's happening on the coast? Yada, yada. People will just sit there and just watch it for hours. When the Boston Marathon bombing happened here in Boston, I caught myself being guilty of this. At the time when they were trying to find the Cernoff brothers, I remember watching local news, just hoping, did they find them? Did they find them? These guys lived around the corner and down the street from me in Cambridge, for people who don't know. So I remember just sitting there watching like, oh my God, these guys are on the run. We were all on lockdown. Nobody knew what was going on. So I remember just watching. And finally, my husband actually said, we need to turn this off. They're just saying the same thing over and over and over. And eventually by that time, that night, this news cycle started at 5 a.m. that morning when I was actually getting ready to go to work. Later on that night, they announced that the lockdown was over. They caught them and we were able to leave, free to leave our apartments, etc. But the point is, the more I watched, the more I was afraid. But the more I was afraid, the more I wanted to watch, because I wanted to watch hoping that they would catch them and we would be able to leave our apartments. So they have to find a way to make you afraid of something or someone. So fear is a great motivator, believe it or not.
Here's a summary of the propaganda model. A propaganda model traces the routes by which money and power are able to filter out the news fit to print, marginalize dissent, and allow the government and dominant private interests to get their messages across to the public. The 5 news filters are the essential ingredients of the propaganda model. Here are some further notes on these filters from a contemporary perspective. Back to the first filter, size, ownership, and profit orientation. In his analysis of elite media, Chomsky says,
now, the elite media are the sort of the agenda-setting media. That means the New York Times, the Washington Post, the major television channels, and so on. They set the general framework.
Pause. You hear the outlets that he just gave you: New York Times, Washington Post, CBS, etc. They set the general framework. And by the way, he's right to call them elite media. You can't even get a job at these outlets as a journalist now without having graduated from an elite academic institution. Didn't always used to be that way, but that changed over time. So just keep that in mind. They're the ones that drive the narrative. They're usually the first.
Local media more or less adapt to their structure. And they do this in all sorts of ways, by selection of topics, by distribution of concerns, by emphasis and framing of issues, by filtering of information.
Filtering of the information. This piece is very important. That's what I was trying to tell you guys. We think they're telling us everything. They're not telling us everything. They're not telling us everything. When I did internship, when I was in undergrad, same thing with us. When I did an internship at the local news station, it was the same situation. We would come back with all these different stories, but they would just pull this, and out. We'd interview people and they would pull out certain interviews and keep the ones that were going to give them the ratings, the ones that had like the village idiot. That's what they refer to it as. Like what you see on the news is not the whole story, whether it's local news or whether it's CNN or Fox News. It's never the whole story. What you see are them put together as much content as they can in a tight package that can fit into a 30-second slot for local news and leave room and space for commercial airtime as well and advertisers. That's what you see. That's what you see. Now, to that point in reference to a network like CNN, which is 24-hour news, they got all damn day. So what's their excuse? Nothing other than the fact that they're trying to feed you propaganda.
By bounding of debate within certain limits, they determine, they select, they shape, they control, they restrict in order to serve the interests of dominant elite groups in the society.
Dominant elite groups. This is what they're actually trying to serve. You see, they have to keep that advertiser revenue coming in. They got to keep that ad revenue coming in.
He's also, or even especially, critical of progressive agenda-setting elite media.
The emperor's lapdogs, like the New York Times.
In Chomsky's analysis, it makes perfect sense for the capitalist system that its mainstream media are somewhat woke, and that as a sort of left-wing neoliberalism, or a fake left, they express a certain liberal bias.
In fact, if the system functions well, it ought to have a liberal bias, or at least appear to, because if it appears to have a liberal bias, that will serve to bound thought even more effectively. In other words, if the press is indeed adversarial and liberal and all these bad things, then how can I go beyond it? They're already so extreme in their opposition to power that to go beyond it would be to take off from the planet. So therefore, it must be that the presuppositions that are accepted in the liberal media are sacrosanct.
Mainstream fake left media like CNN or the New York Times suggest to viewers that Biden is okay, so that Sanders can be avoided. Or in the UK, like a BBC or Guardian, they suggest that a mainstream woke Labour Party is fine, and thereby they subvert a more radical, potentially dangerous leftism as represented by Jeremy Corbyn.
See how this works, guys? I'm not going to play the entire video, but this is very good. I think you should watch the rest of it when you have time. It's called Noam Chomsky, Media and Mass Manipulation. I'll actually put the link to it here in the chat for you to check out when you have time, just because I think it's longer than this. It's like 32, little bit over 32 minutes. But I think what they say here is very important. And if you watch this, or if you've read Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent, then you'll see how these things are able to play out. Then you'll see that. But in order for that narrative to change, there has to be mass movement in the streets. And that's how you can get some shift there. They're still not going to go all the way to your side, but it's harder for them to ignore it and not report on it when there are masses of people out there. So the protests are working. Let me go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Robert. Do you know of any pro-Palestine rallies or protests happening in Boston soon? So I've already gone to 2 in Boston within the past 2 weeks, but I don't know what else is coming up in Boston, but I do know the really big one is in DC. I think most people are trying to make it to that one Saturday, which is tomorrow. But if you follow some of those Twitter accounts, you'll be able to see that information as well. Also follow Answer Coalition and you'll see some of those. Thank you for the super chat. Barack T Daddy was the nickname for Donald Trump. Interesting. And I'm ready for that second part for the type V and C whenever you're ready, Eric. Thank you for the super chat. Banjo playing Bison. Please do an interview with libertarian Chase Oliver. I don't know who that is, but I can look him up. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. I tagged you in that Phil Scott Chi-Town migrant video. Yes, it was you that tagged me in that. Thank you for the super chat, Barack. T Daddy is the nickname for Donald Trump. Thank you. Oh, this came through twice for some reason. I don't know what happened. Thank you, Mary. These blunders by the Israeli army are hoping the U.S. would come in and take over command and run the fight. Thank you, Justin B. Beautifully said, Rome. Yeah, Rome hit the nail on the head, right? And thank you, Bryce. Edward Bernays is a person to look up about propaganda too. I heard about that. Thank you, Bryce. I'll take the comment on Rockfin as well. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Daniel. I think Kamala Harris is full of it. Israel is involved in a land grab in the West Bank where, while all eyes are on Gaza, settlers are going into Palestinian villages, threatening them, vandalizing their homes and property while demanding they leave their homes and villages under the cover of the Israeli army. Unfortunately, out of terror, the Palestinians are leaving their homes and villages. Yeah, and this has been going on for years. And thank you for the tip, Roger. Hamas hiding in the ambulance, really? Only thing worse than a lie is a sloppy lie. The State Department, with its MSM mouthpiece, is losing their war on information. Regarding the last segment, the only thing that worries me about them staying home is that less voting on ballot initiatives. That's true, too. Thank you.